All right, everybody, welcome back to Digging Deeper. Pete Goodman here with our special guest, Dan Buxton, who was able to bring the word yesterday. It was great.
Thank you.
Dan, welcome to the podcast. This is your first time on, right?
This is first time on. Yes. Very excited.
It's a very special treat to be on this podcast that 9 people listen to. Welcome.
Hey,
welcome.
I'm one of those 9 people.
You're one of the 9. So now it's only 8 this week.
That's only 8 people this week. Well, I'll listen back to myself.
Yeah. To the rest of you 8, welcome. Good to have you. I literally don't know who listens to this podcast, actually. I should probably, I don't know, maybe it is more than 9. Okay, so yesterday we were continuing our series that we kicked off about the first few chapters of Revelation, looking at the letters to the churches. And this was our 3rd week in the series.
Yep.
So you walk through Thyatira, whatever we want to say it, and also just spend some time getting to know you a little bit. Sure. So let's jump back there first. So I want to know more about your fraternity days. Because you shared that with me, and I'm like, I kind of related to that. So you were, from my understanding of your story yesterday, and again, people that listen to this or hopefully have already heard the message, so we don't have to recap everything.
Yeah.
But you shared, like, obviously you came to some sort of some type of faith or belief in Jesus as a child. Mm-hmm. High school, maybe it sounded, and you can correct me, it sounded like you didn't necessarily walk away from it. It just sort of became not a lot going on.
Yeah.
Then you get to college. So when you get to college, you join a fraternity, which clearly you must have known what you were getting into.
Yeah.
What was going on because I joined a fraternity, but I wasn't really following Jesus at the time.
Yeah.
Like, what was going on for you that led you to join it? And then what happened?
Yeah. Interestingly, I just kind of felt like I wanted to join the fraternity. I was a super introvert for a long time, and I wanted to kind of expand out and get some
You
networking.
wanted to buy some friends.
I wanted to buy friends. Yes, I wanted to buy friends. But I spoke with my college pastor, Brent Hayden, and I had a strong accountability group at the time, and we all talked about it, and we decided to go forward, that I was going to go forward with it. And so I pledged a fraternity, but I hadn't fully made the full commitment to Jesus at the time. I was just still kind of in that process. But definitely after I'd already committed and I was already in the fraternity, and then I said, hey, I want to be all in for Jesus. I wanted to make sure that the accountability was all around me.
Gotcha. So it wasn't, and I'm asking you personally, just because my own experiences, had you been fully in, would you have still joined the fraternity?
Probably not that fraternity. Yeah. I didn't know that there was a Christian fraternity on campus. I only found out about that later on. But it was a good experience. I did stupid things I'm not proud of, even with the accountability group. But the cool thing about the fraternity was that the kind of the ritual elements of it, the deep kind of things,
the secret handshake,
the secrets, handshakes, and all that stuff was directly quoted from scripture, which is kind of interesting. Like they just ripped the stuff.
Ours was too.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, when it came down to it, I was actually elected president of my fraternity because I exemplified the content of our
That's
ritual.
what they said. What they meant was you're the only sober one that will talk to the police.
Exactly, which is what it tended to be. Yep. Yes. So
same here.
Yep. So yeah, no, it was a good experience. A lot of things. I grew a lot of confidence building, a lot of leadership development happened in there. Made a lot of good friends, but I was able to kind of just walk away from it at the end of it.
Yeah. So I asked for a reason, and I'll come back to it, but tell me about, okay. So in your yesterday, you mentioned this guy takes over some kind of college pastor role and challenges you to, do you know Jesus?
Yeah.
Are we talking about this was like a day conversation, or is this like a 5-6 month period of your life? Like what does this series look like for you
That was one day. So, they had brought in a college pastor, and my mom called me up and she's like, hey, they brought in a college pastor. I want you to go there. And I was like, yeah, not going to happen. And she said, no, please, will you do this for me? And I said, okay. So I grabbed 4 of my friends and we went to meet at this house where the guy was going to be. And there were 2 other guys there, and then it was me and all my friends. And before we got there, we all agreed that if things were lame, within 10 minutes, we would just leave and call it whatever. We got in there, we started talking. He brought a lot of Mexican food, and so we were just like hanging out, having a good time. And then he just started talking, and he just wanted to see where everybody stood with the Bible and with Jesus. And he had asked a couple people. One of my friends was like, "Yeah, I don't even believe any of this stuff. This is dumb." And then he asked me, and I gave him that answer. I said, "Look, I prayed the prayer when I was like 6, and I was in Awana. I knew all the verses. I know the Bible backwards and forwards. Whatever." And he's like, "That's great. Do you know Jesus?" And I said, "Well, I just told you." And he said, No. Do you know Jesus?" And at that moment, like, it really resonated with my heart that I couldn't really give a good answer to that. Like, I just was giving the Sunday school answer, quote unquote, over and over again. And so that was kind of like a resonating moment. And most of my friends did not come back the next week, but I continued to come back. And it was over the next months that I really, with that continual prodding and continual seeking actually to know Jesus, that there was a transformation that happened in my life. So yes, it was in a moment. It was one night, and also just being under his guidance and discipleship for.
So your freshman year of college, you're both growing and developing your relationship with Jesus and pledging a fraternity at the same time.
Pledged later, but yes.
Oh, you pledged later, so you didn't start as a freshman.
No.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, interesting. And I appreciate that. I think it was, it's good to hear because, and I'm sure this is something that you've hit on many times in your life, just because your own story. When we talk to people about the message of the gospel, about what it means to follow Jesus, like, everyone is coming from different places, you know. And for some people, their story is, I was addicted to drugs and homeless and an atheist. And then, and for other people, it's like, well, no, I actually grew up in this, but it wasn't something real to me, or, and like being able to like say like, hey, there's people from all different parts of this story that come from different places. And so, like our youth pastor, Anthony, his story is the complete opposite.
Right.
But both situations, it's the power of God meeting a human being and bringing change to their life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you're in a fraternity, and yesterday this was a difficult passage. And we joked about, kind of throwing it in fairness, just to say for the record, you actually gave me the dates you were able to preach.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
It had nothing to do with, but, the overall sort of big idea, I think, of this passage is you have Christians engaging in things they're not supposed to engage in, falling into sin, and most likely justifying it or thinking it's okay, whether it was because a leader was telling them it was okay, or they just wanted to feel it was okay. And I'm just projecting my own personal experience. But for me, I resonate with that mostly during the 2 years I tried to be a Christian in a fraternity house. But you didn't connect it. I'm just wondering, like, can you, like, was that, because you mentioned you did some dumb things. Like, for me, that was 2 of the most difficult years of my life, trying to not fall into those things, living amongst it.
Yeah. And
did you live in the house?
I did live in the house. I totally agree. Like, those at one level, there were times where it was actually easy to be a Christian, because I could make decisions against what other people were doing on an ethical, moral level. But
why was that easy? Sorry, explain that.
Just because, like, I could tell them, because I had developed respect within them, I could tell them, look, I'm just not going to do that. That's not who I am. I'm not going to follow through with that. At another level, it was very difficult because they seemed to be having so much fun doing what they were doing. And I think that, that might even be what the people in Thyatira were seeing, is like, look, I go and, I'm at this whatever guild worship service. People are having a good time. Like, it's a party and people want to have, do whatever's going on. You don't want to be the only one that's not included. But there were often times where I was the only sober one sitting in a corner or whatever, and just doing my own thing. But I also had really great conversations. I mean, if you if you want to talk to people about Jesus, find drunk people. They will talk to you about Jesus.
Yeah.
And, they might not remember a whole lot afterwards, but they're very honest and they're very open. They'll tell you exactly what they think. And they ask good questions sometimes because they're, the inhibitions are down.
Sure.
But yeah, I think the hardest part was just wanting to be a part of what's going on. And I think that's, when you give in to those temptations and,
Sure.
I didn't do horrible, stupid stuff, but just things that I wish that didn't have on my record. So
yeah. I think when you were talking yesterday, towards the end of your message, I could tell you were running into what I would have run into had I been teaching this passage, which was every time we get up and preach the word of God, we need to explain it, but then we also need to talk about how is this applicable to my life.
Right.
And like you mentioned, there's probably not anyone who their boss is going to fire them if they don't engage in wicked behavior.
Yeah.
So what does it look like for us? And I was thinking to myself, I'm most related to that in a fraternity. And when you shared that you were in one, where it wasn't for me a matter of, if you don't do this, you starve or something. It was more of what you just said. For me, it was always the combination of, number one, there's a reason people want to do that.
Yeah.
There's a reason I want to eat 9 Rice Krispie bars.
Yeah.
I've eaten 2 today.
One right before we came on.
Right before we came on. It's because they taste good. The problem is, like you mentioned, you did a really good connection there of like someone who cares about me is saying that's not healthy for you.
Yeah.
And so trusting him and saying this, but it there's a reason I want to do it. And when you're surrounded by it, when you're immersed in it, it's so much harder because I'm not immersed in it anymore. I'm not around it.
Exactly.
So no one's I guess the word would be tempting. But I'm also a pastor and I'm 45 and married and have kids. I don't live that life anymore, but I imagine there are people who are still, struggle with that. Whatever your issues might be, it's oftentimes the hardest thing is if you can't escape or get away from it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, right now in this stage of my life, if there's something that's tempting to me or potentially leading me in a place that's going to be unhealthy, it's not that hard for me to be like, I'm just going to cut that thing out of my life.
Right.
When you live in this house with 60 drunks and all their girlfriends, you're just this is really I
can't escape it. Yeah.
Yeah. There were so many times I just would have to lock my door and sit alone in my room, which was the other thing. It was it was appealing. You want to do it, but then there's also this sense of if I don't engage in this, I'm alone.
Yeah.
I don't have any friends because all of my friends do this.
Right.
The beauty of the church in many ways is I discovered it at 21 when I was trying to avoid those things and feeling alone. The reality of church for me was not just this is this place I'm going to go and someone's going to preach at me and then sing some songs. It was there are other human beings trying to do what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Trying to be strong like I'm trying to be strong. Yeah. And I met people like Brandon and others who we started doing life together. And suddenly I have these people that I'm in a community with that are now seeking the same things and trying to do the same things I'm trying to do, trying to stay strong. So the worst thing in that environment was when I have this community of people who are quote unquote like-minded. We're all trying to do this together. And then 1 or 2 of them don't want to try anymore and actually start pulling the direction. And instead of being a support for me, they're like, dude, let's just go get drunk. Why don't we just go out with those girls tonight?
Yeah.
And when I look at Thyatira, and you really kind of hit on this a lot, I think that there's something there where it's the message was not so much to the whole church, hey, you all are sinning. It was a message to people within the church that were causing the rest of the church to struggle.
Yeah.
And so it made me think of, and I was talking to Robert, there's another place in Corinthians where Paul gets more specific, where this is very metaphorical.
Yeah.
Paul is very much there are people in your little community who are doing terrible things and potentially leading you to do terrible things. You need to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, and you've been in different forms of ministry, whatever. If someone, let's start with the theoretical. I'm coming to you and I'm saying, hey, Dan, why does Paul tell me to kick people out of the church?
Yeah.
there's a heading in the NIV Bible that says expel the immoral brother.
Yeah.
Like, how would you respond to that?
Well, I mean, the parallel off of that is where Jesus is speaking in Matthew. It's a little pet peeve of mine when everybody pulled the verse out of context when they say, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I'm in their midst. Well, that whole passage is about kind of dealing with sin in the congregation or in the community, and how do you deal with it? And the reality is that we need to treat one another in love. And if somebody, you find out somebody's in some sort of sin or caught up in something and they need help, or even they're not even know that they need help, you need to go to them and you need to have a conversation with them and point out where they're in sin. And if that doesn't work, then you grab another friend, and hopefully, it's a close friend and you're not just pulling a random person, and you walk through the process of trying to help them to see where they're not in alignment with what God wants for their best. Mm-hmm. And, just using scripture and Jesus's words, towards, true life, then you walk through that process with them. And if they're continuing to be in sin against that, then you're supposed to bring in a pastor, and then you're supposed to put them in front of the entire church. And then if they still don't repent, then you're supposed to treat them as an unbeliever, which most people consider, we're just going to toss them out. But Jesus is pretty clear that we're supposed to love the unbeliever and treat them, with grace and trying to help them to repent. And so, yeah, you're supposed to expel the immoral brother, but that I understand it as they can't be part of what's going on in the congregation because their sin is actually affecting the entire congregation. And so we need to treat them in a way that says, look, you're sleeping around, you're not doing what's right. We need to pull you aside. We need to have a conversation. We need to see how we can help you with this. And maybe we need to get you some help, get you extra, counseling or whatever. But if they're continuing to be unrepentant, then they can be kind of, potentially damaging to the rest of the church. And so while you don't want to just toss them out, essentially that's what the conversation becomes. And it's not an easy conversation. I've never had to do it, so I don't know.
Do you think that's relevant to large churches like ours, or do you see it more as something that should happen in the context of like a small group or small community?
Definitely it's best within the small group community. And I don't think it happens on a large church basis, because I think that those people just jump to another church more or less, where they might not have any, scrutiny or whatever. Again, it's hard for me to know. I've never had to do it.
Yeah.
I've had people where, they're stuck in something. We have a conversation, we pray about it. We seek the Lord together. We work together, and arm in arm, and hold each other accountable. And, if they're continuing to seek after Christ, then Christ continues to move and challenge. It's not necessarily that the sin goes away or that the temptation never goes away, but definitely there's a continuing improvement. I believe the sanctification, which is the process of becoming more and more like Christ, is a long-term process. And I wish that it was an overnight thing. Whereas, for some people it is, let's take Anthony, for example, where he has a Christ experience and, drops some things in a hat. And some of us, we have to battle for years and years and years. And I think even Paul kind of talks about that when in Romans, when he talks about the things that he wants to do but can't do, and the things that he doesn't want to do but he still does, and he's at war with himself. Not to say that he's engaging in sin, but that he's definitely fighting against a brokenness that still exists in us.
I think in the context of this passage, just looking at the text, he says, I have this against you in chapter 2, verse 20. Mm-hmm. You tolerate. Yeah. So his issue is, first of all, you're letting this happen. And you're not doing it, you're letting it happen.
Yeah.
And this whole, like the woman Jezebel who called herself a prophet, you kind of talked about that, probably more of probably a metaphorical way of referring to someone who's doing what Jezebel did.
Yeah.
But he says this, by her teaching, she misleads my servants. And I think that the really important aspect of this passage, and even, what does it mean with the whole, how do you handle people who are quote unquote in sin in a community? I think that phrase misleads is so important, because I don't personally see a lot of places in the scripture where someone who's failing or having not, struggling to overcome something like an addiction is like, hey, kick him to the curb.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all of the difficult sayings of Jesus, even in his life or even here in Revelations, were directed at leaders, right? Directed at people that are actually saying, follow me. And the challenge, I think, is in this case, it really looks to me like, and you really touched on it a lot. You talked about the idea of leaders in the church. In any situation where somebody is leading others into sin, it seems like that's when Jesus is like, hey, like we got a problem here.
Yeah.
In the case of Corinthians, when I look at the context, what Paul is saying, he doesn't say that, but I get the sense that his issue is not just like this is happening, but that it's corrupting all of you. So in a sense, they're leading you, like you're following into this because you're leaving it in your church. Not like, hey, this person's messed up, they're making mistakes, they're trying to change whatever. But no, they're like, this is like infecting you. And so and here you're tolerating this person who is leading you into sin.
Yeah.
And I think when I was in college and I was in a fraternity, it was like the people in my life, and I had a lot of people in my life who none of them were Christians. The ones who were just like living their life and it was different than mine were always people that I had fun with and got along with.
Yeah.
The guys that I struggled with are like the guys that you shared, who actually wanted to be like, oh, Goodman, come on, just have a beer with us, come on, whatever. We're like, and not that having a beer is the ultimate sin, but for me, I was a raging alcoholic and I had to get it out of my life.
Right.
But it was the leading, it was the people that are like enticing and saying, I can't tolerate that.
Yeah.
And it's just got to go. And so I think there's a line there between saying someone has faults or problems versus someone is literally leading you into this.
Yeah.
And that we're not to tolerate that.
Agreed.
Strong word. I don't know.
Yeah. Also in Corinthians, I think that part of the issue was that they're also championing this person, if I can say that correctly. They're kind of like, they're celebrating. They're like, look how gracious we are about, tolerating this person.
Or maybe open-minded.
We're the open-minded.
Sure.
And, I think that plays into it too, where Paul is like, no, don't champion, opposite. Toss this out.
Yeah.
And I the hard thing about Corinthians is that we, it's a response to a letter that we don't have. And so, so we don't even know if somebody was like, hey, this guy is doing this, what do we do? Or, or was it like, oh, Paul heard about this and is just totally responding. And, yeah.
What's hard and it's unrelated is we actually don't have 2 Corinthians either.
Right.
So 2 Corinthians is probably 3rd and 4th Corinthians put together.
Right.
And there may even be one in between those.
Mm-hmm.
So when you read 2 Corinthians, you definitely get the sense that they replied to him in a very unkind, unfavorable manner. Like, who the crap are you to tell us this? Because then he has to come back and defend his ministry.
Right.
Like, wait a second. Like, you know who that was unrelated. So I want to dig deeper. If I were to have been teaching this passage, I probably wouldn't have touched on it either. But there's some pretty heavy stuff in this that you didn't even comment on. So, number one, Jesus, will cast her on a bed of suffering, and I'll kill your children.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, Dan, and we're all friends here. I mean, you obviously spent some time studying the passage. You read some commentaries. You brought some, but like, what did you glean when you were studying this that would maybe give a potential like answer to what the crap?
It was hard to kind of wrestle through. The commentaries I saw was that they were trying to say that there was going to be some like real consequences, whether it was, I don't know, some sort of purging that was going to happen. It's hard to know because we don't actually know what happened in the church, other than the church doesn't exist anymore. And I mean, Thyatira doesn't even really exist. It's all ruins. And we have, records of the guilds and things like that, but there's no record of that church that ever existed. So obviously something, I don't know if maybe they didn't repent. And I mean, even my wife was kind of pointing out, she's like, you should have told everybody that this church doesn't exist. So maybe they didn't. And it, kind of as a true warning to us. But yeah, it was hard to kind of wrestle with that. Like, Jesus is not usually that forceful unless it's with leadership. And it's, it's one of those things. I don't know. I tell people when I'm talking to them and they're trying to like, well, what if I don't have the answer for, my faith or whatever, you can say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that we have enough information what that was going. I mean, if you want to play eschatology, you can, some of the, I want to say what it is, some of the views of this is that it's a referencing a time in church history, and there was, severe persecution and a lot of people died. I try to like put that one, these letters back in the historical context of where they were at. And I think that Jesus was trying to, again, kind of reference back maybe to Old Testament, where, we see this in Judges and Leviticus and, Numbers, when the Israelites are turning in, to sin, and there's consequences, and, you got bad things that happen, people die on a hard basis. And I don't necessarily have a great answer for that either, of why God would allow a plague to come and ravage through, because David decided to count how many
that was
warriors.
My next question for you, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, these are tough things, and I trust that God is is faithful, and that sometimes it's just hard to wrestle through.
It's fair.
There's not really good answers. I mean, there's good answers for why some people deserve, the punishment that they get, or at least, you can accept that, okay, that was going to happen. But then there's sometimes where you're like, wow, God, you really allowed all these people to be punished because of a leader did something stupid.
Yeah. Well, in this case, that's not actually the case, because he says, I will put her on a bed of suffering, and those who commit adultery with her, and her children I will strike dead. And I think there's a couple things there, and I agree with everything you said. I mean, there's so many passages in the Bible that are difficult with that, and this is difficult as well. I would say, though, that number one, you pointed out really well that it's almost, I want to say unlikely, it's almost for certain that there wasn't a person named Jezebel.
Yeah.
Jewish people didn't name their kids Jezebel. It'd be like naming your kid Adolf.
Right.
And it was a Jewish name. So if he's talking to Greek, anyway, so he's doing something with Old Testament allusions.
Yeah.
And I know that's a really harsh thing, but like calling someone Adolf, like you're saying something.
Yeah.
Like you're saying like that person's evil, or Hitler or something.
Right.
Jezebel was a terrible name. So we know, number one, this wasn't the person's name. I think you could even go a step further and say Jezebel, for a lot of, actually it was in the news recently, I'm not going to talk about it. For a lot of Christians, the concept of Jezebel means something more than the person of Jezebel. The way, again, I'm just drawing a parallel, but the way that Hitler speaks of racism and war and violence, Jezebel speaks of idolatry and turning away from God. So it's very possible, given the rest of the book, where Jezebel comes up again later, riding on the back of a dragon, he's speaking to a group of people, a movement, a way of thinking that represent, like he could be just saying all the people that are doing this are acting like Jezebel did, and you're tolerating it. Because that's actually in line with the rest of the book. If you didn't have the next 20 chapters, I couldn't say that. But as you keep reading, you realize he does that a lot.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then her children aren't real children. They're just people who are choosing to follow her.
Yeah.
And in that case, the suffering isn't just a undeserved randomness. It's there are consequences to this decision. If you don't stop, you're going to feel them, which was a big point that you made, right?
Yeah.
Like one of your slides was your actions affect your life.
Affect your life, yeah.
Which I'm sure you've experienced, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and in my studying, there was little to anybody that suggested that children were actually her children, or that something came out of the prostitution or whatever that was going on, the sexual immorality. But it was definitely alluding to that these are probably just the followers of it.
I think here's why I think that's important, because I agree with your statement that there are going to be times in the Bible that we just have to say we don't know. There are. I also think sometimes, though, there are things that are so egregious that if we can't provide some kind of answer for them, they're undermining the Bible. So
Right.
if you can't offer some defense in the sense of like, well, I don't know, God just likes killing children. It's like, well, hold on a second here.
No.
Now, I don't know God's wisdom. You know, I was reading 1 Corinthians this morning. Like, my wisdom is foolishness. Like, I mean, his ways are higher than mine.
Yeah.
So I always have to be open for the fact that I just don't understand certain things.
Right.
But at the same time, I think I can also look at it and say, in this context, I actually can offer a fairly decent, logical way of saying, I don't have to attribute infanticide to God.
Right.
I think I think we could look at this and say the entire style of writing throughout Revelation is, you know, big, metaphorical, very verbose, very angry.
Yeah.
Like, do I think that God is going to turn the sun to blood? Do I think a mountain is going to fall on people? I don't even know what it would look like for a mountain to fall on people.
Right.
Like, I don't live by, well, I guess I kind of do.
You
But
even touched on that last week with the 10 days.
Yeah,
People like
right.
that was probably a metaphorical.
Yeah. So my
terminology,
concern with Revelation is when you reach these weird places, you're like, oh, look, he loves killing people. It's like, hold on, you got to understand the tone and tenor of this whole book, the way that he's using pictures and metaphors. I don't think these are real children. My gut feeling would be there was probably a person who, you know, especially if you look at like some of the women in leadership of like cultic practices like Aphrodite and Ephesus, who would have maybe sort of become a Christian but still wanted to maintain that. So maybe it was a real person, but I don't think her children were literal. Like you said, they're like, oh, these are probably the kids that were coming from all this sex. And I was like, I think God wouldn't judge them and kill them.
No, absolutely.
I think he's talking about followers, because that's very common to say your children in the concept of like a child following a mother. I'm going where you're going.
Yeah.
But dude, overall, it was just great. I appreciate having you up there. It's good to have you.
It was a pleasure.
I appreciate too, like the role you're playing as an elder. This is a really weird time.
Yeah.
I've said this. This is probably the third or fourth time I've said this in this podcast. I'm 45 this year, and I got into ministry like right after college, and even in college, I started doing it like you. So, 24 years on some level, I've been doing this. I have so many pastors and elders that I owe apologies to, just having no concept of what they were going through.
Right.
Now that I'm living it, and it's like you guys, like I was thinking about I was thinking about this morning. This is a complete tangent, but your job sucks because nobody cares if you do things well. If you do things well, you disappear and don't exist.
Right.
If you don't do things well, everybody hates you, and you don't get paid for any of this.
Right. Which is why we like to stay in the shadows until somebody decided, hey, let's do videos and put people on stage, and we'll just make sure everybody knows
we know who to throw rocks at.
Exactly. No, it's been it's been hard. I won't sugarcoat that.
And we haven't even picked anyone yet.
I know. So I don't even have to deal with any fallout yet.
Yeah.
But I mean, the guys that are on the board are amazing. And they're really honestly and desperately seeking the Lord on what is the next step for Rise. And I want to, assure all the people of Rise that, I mean, we all spend tons and tons of time on our knees, just trying to listen to the Lord. We are extremely grateful, not only or also for the other team that's helping with this.
There's some great volunteers on that team.
There are amazing volunteers and staff that are doing amazing work, that are trying to seek the Lord too, and try and listen for where He's leading. And there's one thing that we're all in alignment with, is that we want who the Lord wants for Rise, and not somebody that I find better than somebody else or whatever. We'd really just want to hear God speak, and we want Him to choose who's next for Rise. So that gives us hope, and it helps with the harder times. But yeah, it's not the easiest part. Like I mentioned, I came on at COVID, and there's been a lot of things that go on that nobody knows. And
so you came on during COVID or right after it?
Right before.
It's all a blur to me.
It's all a blur.
So 2019, you joined the team.
Yeah.
and then COVID hit and everything. Because 2019 is, I think, when we lost a few elders that were already starting to move out of California.
Correct.
And then I think our entire elder board changed in like 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
With people leaving the state. And,
yeah.
Getting on. They must have known this was coming. And
they're like, hey, the Lord told me that I need to move. And yeah. So.
Oh man, no, I just want you to know I appreciate you. I appreciate all you guys.
Thanks.
I think it's okay to admit to people that we're all a little nervous, and there's always fear in the back of our minds. Like, I had somebody ask me like, well, what if they make the wrong decision? And I was like, well, if you're worried about that, imagine how much sleep they're losing over it.
Right? Yeah.
So trust me, we're all worried about it. But what can you do other than just trust God in this season?
Exactly. I mean, it's not our church. This is God's church. And God forbid that he wanted to say, Rise had its time and I need to send all these people to other churches to do other things. God's kingdom is going to continue to grow and is going to continue to be out. We just hope that we still get to be a part of that. And we're expectant and believing that that's what's going to happen and that God has the right person to help lead the people of this church. God is doing amazing things. So I don't think that would be necessarily the case. And I think that that's been pretty clear, like as we've gone forward, that it seems like you made the comment yesterday after we prayed, just, Ben was out and, Brandon is now stepped down, and yet the church not only continues to function correctly, but is still flourishing. People are still coming to Jesus, Kidsmen is happening and kids are connecting with Jesus. People feel like they're loved and supported. Hope and healing continues to happen. The Lord's still here and still moving. We just don't have a person that's kind of giving us the vision for what's next. And so we're expecting that that's going to happen. But this is God's place, and God is moving through all the people here. It's not just pastoral staff. It's not just us as elders. We believe, God's Holy Spirit is in every person that has put their trust in Jesus, and it continues to move. And so we're excited about that.
It's good. It's a good place to end.
Yes.
Thanks for that. Thanks for your leadership, and thanks for preaching.
Awesome.
And look forward to seeing it happen again. So,
yes.
Guys, this was Digging Deeper, episode 374,262. We'll see you next week. I don't know. We're going to continue our series. Robert's up this weekend. He's going to talk. We're going to do a little switcheroo, and actually, we're going to go out of order with the churches, partly just because of scheduling conflict.
Yeah.
Robert wanted to preach on Laodicea, but men's retreat, some other stuff. So he's on this week, and then I'll end by switching and going back to Sardis on the 5th. Yeah. And Mariah's on Mother's Day. So a lot of different opportunities to get people to share and hear. And then we got One Meal coming up.
One Meal.
Packing on the 19th.
I love that.
And that night, we're going to have a going away party for Brandon. So it's going to be a busy couple weeks.
Yeah.
And then hopefully in June, there'll probably be some interaction with potential candidates. That's the goal.
That's the goal. Yeah.
Yeah. Not guaranteeing anything. That's the goal.
Yeah.
If we have a candidate come in, one thing I thought about doing, and don't hold me to this, but I've actually thought about having them preach, and then like Sunday afternoon coming in and recording a Digging Deeper with them.
That would be cool.
And then releasing Digging Deeper, just try to get like this kind of conversation with the candidates so people can kind of get a more, I may even just talk about their preaching or whatever. So our goal is, even if someone comes in to guest speak, we still do a Digging Deeper for them. So, but we'll see. I got, that's still in the back of my brain. So, but I think it could be helpful to get to know people better.
Don't lock it down. I mean, you don't know what the candidate's schedule and stuff like that.
It might not work. I might realize it was a terrible idea later for some reason, but that happens to me pretty much every other Thursday. But okay, guys, have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Digging Deeper. Thanks.
See you later.